Jesse, Watson, and Arthur the Wonder Horse.
Hello, my friends. I wish to share with you a few thoughts, muses, and ponderings regarding the noble horse, and some fundamentals of how they are trained and indeed domesticated, let's say. Arthur I met upon a mountain a couple of miles from where I now live. Here he is at about 6 months old. We're in the herd. It was part of a breeding herd. I spent a couple of months getting him comfortable with my presence, which was a great success. Here he is dozing. Look at him. He almost looks like a gorilla, the way his chest bows out. I love this bit of footage. Look at his shoulders. What a pose. He looks like a chess piece. He's a funny lad. How I love him. So, first off, before we get to some more philosophical matters, I shall share with you what I have learnt, one of the most fundamental things about horses, for those of you who aren't horsey people. And indeed, there are some horsey people who know precious little about the training of horses, for they buy their horses already broken, and they never meet a wild horse. Arthur was essentially wild. Well, he was an owned horse, part of an owned herd, but he was untouched when I first contacted him, as were all the other breeding horses, the mares and the stallion in the herd. Aye. So the fundamental thing that I've learnt, and I have experimented with it, but I've found it really is the fact of the matter, is that horses are exceedingly hierarchical creatures. They've got zero interest in equality. They are not woke. No, they are determinedly right-wing conservative creatures. Much to the chagrin of many people, I have no doubt, who project onto them all sorts of candy-coated ideas. But I think the basic truth is that if you meet a wild horse, you are meeting a very hierarchical creature. And so one of the most important things, or in fact, the kind of be end and end all of training a horse is establishing leadership. Obviously, you have some maneuvers and techniques you have to train them to do, but none of that is possible if you are not leader. Because, this being the case, because a herd of horses, at least in my view, and I think more experienced horsemen than me, Arthur is, by the way, my first horse, and I'm learning how to train as I work with him, but a herd of horses, they are flight animals. They are preyed upon by other animals, or were, and so they are flight animals, which is very different, for example, from a dog. And it's often rather painful to hear because people compared horses and dogs, and they are entirely different mentalities, because a dog is a predator and a horse is a prey animal. So they have entirely different minds, the way they think. And so a herd of horses, in order for it to escape effectively from prey, needs to move in a harmonious, synchronous fashion away from the threat. And in order to do that, they need a strong leader that they all follow without argument. Now then, in order for that dominant horse to become leader, there is a hierarchy through the herd. You'll have more dominant horses and less and more submissive horses, sort of moving up towards the top, and then you'll have a dominant horse at the top. And in order for that dominant horse to establish its leadership position, one of the key things which signify its dominance is whether other horses get out of its way. In other words, who moves whose feet is of great importance to the horse, and they are experts in extreme subtleties of body language that in their reading of the dominance and submissive equation, so to speak. So, what you are watching in front of you here, I have done much work with Arthur on a lead rope and all the rest of it, but I decided over the last couple of weeks to work with him without a rope, because I find it simulates the dynamics of a herd better. And that being that when horses are deciding their dominance, they will use force. They will bite, kick, push, barge, and indeed stallions, a fellow here, one of the breeders who owns the herd, was telling me just the other day that one of his stallions killed two other stallions that were put in with him against his advice to the fellow who put them in with him. They can be extremely dangerous animals, a horse. Arthur weighs 350 kilos approximately, about a third of a ton. So if he hits you, he goes through you like a small car. Aye, so it's very important to have the leadership. And so I'm working with him without a lead rope because I have found it has a much stronger effect if I can get him to do what I want. And also, I can read whether he's doing it voluntarily much more easily because, as you have just seen a couple of minutes ago, he can simply run off if he decides he's not going to follow my command. So I know that he's doing it voluntarily, as opposed to if you've got a lead rope on, you can just pull their nose around. And something happens when you put a collar on a horse. They suddenly kind of give up struggling. You will do that if you put a halter. When I first haltered Arthur, when you put a halter on a wild horse, an incredible change happens. It's just like they just give up. And so I don't want that to happen while I'm discussing dominance with him. I want him his full capacity to challenge me, so to speak. I want him to be able to do that in order that I am entirely, I can clearly read whether he is submitting to my commands. Aye. This is, by the way, this footage, we've only been doing this for a week. I did some early work training him to lunge, so what you're seeing is kind of messy. He's also getting very close, and I'm working at present on getting him to keep his distance, but I'm giving him a lot of reassurance while I'm working with him here, because he's quite nervy, as you can see. He's not entirely sure what's going on, so I am giving him a lot of reassurance, and I'm not permanently getting him to back away from me in the footage here, because I don't want him to get the idea that he's doing something wrong when he moves, which had been the case a little earlier. So I'm getting him to move freely. Aye. So there you go. It's a very important thing to recognise with a horse is if you have nothing to do with horses, but you meet one at a gate, one of the first things that will happen is they will move forward and they will sort of stick their face in your face. And there's a little part of them that is testing to see whether you will step back. And if you do, they will take you as submissive. So the wise thing to do, and they don't take offence to it, it's part of their vocabulary, is just to make a bit of noise, clap your hands, and get them to take a step or two back before, and then invite them in to stroke them. And they learn, therefore, that they need to respect your space, because a dominant horse will just shove through or they'll bite a submissive horse to get it out of the way. Worst case scenario, they'll kick it. And a horse that feels it's in the presence of a more dominant leader of a horse won't do that to them, because they know there's going to be big trouble if they do. Aye. So you can just see here another little example while I'm grooming him. You see me moving his back end out here. It's just a small thing, but all these things make a difference. If he really wouldn't accept my leadership, I'd be pushing and shoving on him and he'd refuse to move. That has happened at times in the past when he has been disputing my leadership. Just to finish that off, because Arthur's in the throes of adolescence at the minute, he's 2.5 years old. They're sort of in adolescence from about their first spring, a year after they're born, if they're born in the spring, through to about 3 or 4 years of age. Their adolescence is sort of, their childhood is quite short and their adolescence is long compared to us. So as with all adolescents, they test boundaries and try for weaknesses, and basically dispute authority just like we do. So yeah, it's been quite a challenge with Arthur. He's got a heck of a lot of spirit, a lot of willpower, and I haven't wanted to destroy that. I want it to be focused rather than, I don't want a sort of stilted, completely numb horse, which can happen if they're broke very hard. Aye. So let's move on to some more philosophical things. But before that, you're just watching me here making a salad for Arthur, which is something I've started doing over the last week or two. It's a nice little, I just enjoy doing it, and I didn't have any carrots in. I was giving him some carrots in his bucket. Occasionally after training, there's a little motivational treat. But not having carrots, I started going around and foraging all the different things I'd seen him eat. There's a bit of wild land at the bottom of the paddocks I work to keep, and these are all the different things I've seen him eat. He's a true survivor, a mountain pony, and those are gorse twigs. Those are one of his great delicacies. He loves chewing on gorse. Very entertaining thing to watch, him eating prickly gorse as well. He'll nibble away at it. There's a bit of footage coming up in a moment of him doing just that. Mint is one of his great, also quite a delicacy to him. Fresh mint out of the bog. All manner of things. Moss, he'll chew off trees. Willow twigs apparently have aspirin in them, so help with the if he's got any aches and pains, just to relieve those. And all sorts of green forage. One incredible thing he's been doing recently, sort of slowly defined, is he's been worming himself. I have been worming him also with proper stuff, ivermectin and the rest of it, but I've discovered he's been worming himself by eating a few leaves off the Leylandi tree. I noticed suddenly he had dropped a lot of worms in his dung. I thought, blimey, how in the heck's he done that? And a day or so earlier, I'd noticed, as I'd walked past a Leylandi tree, he'd reached out and taken a few mouthfuls. I looked it up, and lo and behold, the Leylandi tree was known as wormwood, and they made a worming medicine out of it in the past. And so Arthur appeared to know that, and he dropped his worms, and I thought, blimey, he's got bad worms. Because I didn't know that, and I bought some proper wormer, and hardly anything came out of him, because he'd already done the job, and he's just done it again. I've just wormed him again, and hardly anything has come out, and yes, a couple of weeks ago, I think he'd taken a few more bites off that Leylandi tree, and I saw more worms dropped. So it's quite astonishing. Horses will look after themselves. They know what they need. If they've got the resources, if they've got some wild land, they'll find the herbs and things that they need. It's quite incredible. He's had a little bit of salt on his salad there, by the way. He likes a bit of salt, does Arthur? Aye. So some more philosophical thoughts now to close. Aye. One of the main reasons I want to share my experiences with Arthur, I've got no intention of telling anybody how to train a horse or how to keep one. I keep Arthur. He may be the only horse I have. If he lasts till he's 30, I hope he does. His old man is 30 now on the mountain. I'll be 75, so I hope we'll have a long and happy life together, on the road perhaps. But I keep and train Arthur in my own way. One of the first things you find when you get a horse is everybody's got an opinion on what you should do. Even people who've never had anything to do with horses have an opinion on how horses should be treated and kept and all the rest of it. And you learn pretty quickly that you have to dismiss the vast majority of it, and a lot of it you just have to, a lot of it is exceedingly irritating, to be quite honest. There's a lot of folk out there who just don't have a flipping clue, and they don't realise that you have to be quite stern with a young horse sometimes, and they just, they're all woke about it, and they think you can just do everything with cuddles. And Arthur is a teenage lad. Doesn't like being cuddled. And he will challenge you exceedingly, quite dangerously if you let him think he can get away with it. Aye, he's no old Dobbin. But yes, the main reason I wanted to share stuff is just because they are such a remarkable influence on life. There isn't a companion I have found to date that can rival the noble horse. They are such a calming presence. They demand patience. They demand leadership. They demand, again, in my experience, an unrivaled amount of thought. I've learnt many things in my life, many musical instruments, many arts, many crafts, many to professional level. But training a horse has demanded more of me than anything, I believe. Because at the end of the day, it's a relationship. And you're not entirely in control of everything. I can't control what goes on in Arthur's mind. And a lot of the time, I don't really know what's going on in his mind. I just have to slowly work my way through problems. Aye. So I strongly encourage those of you who aren't horsey, because I'm not really horsey. I've got no interest in sports horses. Like many things, horses have become a kind of sporting commodity since we invented the automobile 100 years ago or so. But before that, for 7,000 years or so before that, depending whereabouts in the world you are, we walked alongside horses. For that time, they were, I think, man's best friend. Up until 100 years ago, and then it became the dog when horses disappeared from our lives. But I often wonder, in fact, whether the therapeutic use of horses, whether the great effect that they have on those with mental health difficulties and things that people are finding today, whether that is in part because they are at last having a subconscious yearning to see the return of that long-lost friend, and that is at last being satisfied. They are truly majestic, wonderful companions. I'm hardly in a bad mood these days. Truth be told, it astonishes me. I just can't be with Arthur around. Look at that old forgotten friend coming back into focus. Particularly if you're a man on his own, a bachelor. I recommend it. They are, by the way, I have very little money. Arthur cost me about the same as a very old second-hand car, few hundred pounds as a foal, and it does cost a little bit, the initial setup. I've got doing everything as cheaply as I can, doing second-hand things, but I've just got a harness and a saddle, got a kit for the saddle, but they're all kind of one-off costs, and I think the total spread over the last 2 years has been about, including buying him, has been about £1,500, but those costs, now I've got the kit, pretty much disappear. It just comes down to a little bit of worming. I don't buy him any fodder, I don't stable him, he stays out. He doesn't even have a rug because he grows a winter coat all of his own. He's born on a mountain. I've caught him shivering once in the late spring. There was a sudden cold snap and he'd lost his winter coat when he was little, and he was shivering a little. But it's never done him any harm, and since then I've never caught him looking even cold. Now he's at full size, yes. I will leave you with a closing thought, the last 1 minute, 20 seconds, and that is something I would like to make a bigger production of one day, perhaps. That is, I wonder whether in fact part of our development of our self-awareness and intellect, our sentience, our intelligence of humanity has actually come about as a result of the self-awareness that is demanded when one interacts in a complex manner with other species. For one must be self-aware, one must moderate one's own emotions, one's own reactions, in order to communicate with them, in order to become acceptable to them, in order to not scare them away, in order to become comprehensible. Aye. There is much to be learned from our forgotten friends. And so, yes, consider the horse. If you've never noticed them now. Aye. With that, good people, I shall leave you. As always, stay dangerous. Cheerio. Bye.